What happens when a television producer walks onto a morning show and turns the entire studio into a battlefield? In just 35 seconds, a single comment would shatter every rule of television etiquette and send Martin Frizell, one of the most powerful producers in daytime television, crashing out of Lorraine Kelly's show in front of millions of stunned viewers. It started like any other morning. The cameras were rolling. The lights were bright. Lorraine Kelly sat in her familiar chair, smiling at the camera with that warm, genuine energy that had made her a household name across Britain. She was dressed impeccably, as always, her makeup perfect, her smile radiant. This was her show, her stage, her home. The audience in the studio was buzzing with excitement. They had come to see Lorraine, to be part of the magic that happened every morning when she welcomed guests and talked about everything, from fashion to current events. Nobody expected what was about to unfold. Lorraine leaned forward, her voice bright and enthusiastic. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest today. Please welcome television producer Martin Frizell. The audience clapped politely as Martin walked onto the set. He was wearing an expensive suit, perfectly tailored, his shoes shining under the studio lights. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who was used to being in charge, used to making decisions that affected millions of viewers. He waved at the audience, a practiced smile on his face, and sat down across from Lorraine. But something was different about him. There was something in his eyes, a certain edge, a sharpness that made the crew members glance at each other nervously. Lorraine, always the professional, did not seem to notice. She was focused on making her guest feel welcome. "Martin, thank you so much for being here," Lorraine said warmly, her Scottish accent soft and inviting. "We're thrilled to have you on the show. I know you've been working on some really exciting projects lately." Martin nodded, but his smile did not quite reach his eyes. "Thanks for having me, Lorraine. Though I have to say, it's interesting being on this side of the camera for once." Lorraine laughed, her natural charm shining through. "I can imagine. You're used to calling the shots behind the scenes. So tell us, what have you been up to lately? What projects are you most excited about?" Martin leaned back in his chair, crossing his legs. There was a pause. Just a moment too long, that made the atmosphere in the studio shift. "Well, Lorraine, that's an interesting question. See, I've been thinking a lot about the state of morning television, about what works and what doesn't." Lorraine's smile remained fixed, but those watching closely could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Confusion, perhaps, or maybe a hint of concern. "Oh, that sounds fascinating. What conclusions have you come to?" Martin's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "I think a lot of shows are stuck in the past, to be honest. They're comfortable. Too comfortable. They rely on the same formula, day after day, year after year. The same soft questions, the same predictable segments, the same," he paused, his eyes fixed directly on Lorraine, "safe hosting." The audience had gone quiet now. The crew members were frozen in place. Everyone could feel it. Something was happening. Something was very wrong. Lorraine blinked, her professional mask slipping just slightly. "Safe hosting? I'm not sure I understand what you mean." Martin uncrossed his legs and leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. "Oh, come on, Lorraine. You know exactly what I mean. Morning television has become too polite. Too nice. Shows like this one." He gestured around the studio with a dismissive wave. "They're all about making everyone feel good. Where's the edge? Where's the risk? Where's the real television?" Lorraine's face had changed now. The warmth was still there, but it was mixed with something else. Disbelief. Hurt. And underneath it all, a quiet strength. "Martin, I think you might be confused about what this show is. We're here to inform and entertain our viewers, to make their mornings a little brighter. That's not being safe. That's being respectful." Martin laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Respectful? Right. That's one way to put it. Another way would be boring, predictable, yesterday's television. The studio had become completely silent now. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath. Lorraine sat up straighter in her chair, her eyes never leaving Martin's face. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was steel in it. Martin, I've been doing this for a very long time. I've built this show on trust, on authenticity, and on respect for our audience. If you think that's boring, then perhaps you've forgotten what morning television is really about. Martin's face darkened. Oh, please, don't lecture me about television. I've produced more successful shows than you could count. I know what audiences want. They want drama. They want conflict. They want something real. Not this, he paused, his voice dripping with disdain. This sugary, feel-good nonsense. Lorraine's jaw tightened. This sugary, feel-good nonsense, as you call it, has been on the air for decades. Our viewers trust us. They invite us into their homes every single morning. That's not something I take lightly. Trust, Martin scoffed. Trust is just another word for complacency. You're coasting, Lorraine. You've been coasting for years. This whole setup, he gestured around the studio again, it's tired. You're tired. Maybe it's time to step aside and let someone with fresh ideas take over. The gasp from the audience was audible now. Even the most inexperienced viewer could tell that Martin had crossed a line, a thick, bold line that should never have been crossed. Lorraine's face had gone very still, but her eyes were blazing. Excuse me? Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the studio like a knife. Martin shrugged, completely unbothered by the tension crackling in the air. You heard me. Maybe it's time for a change. Television is evolving. Audiences are evolving. But you're still doing the same thing you were doing 20 years ago. It's boring. You're boring. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire studio seemed to be frozen in time, and then Lorraine stood up. Slowly, deliberately. She looked down at Martin, and when she spoke, her voice was firm and unwavering. Martin, I have sat here and listened to you insult my show, my work, and me personally. I have tried to be professional. I have tried to give you the benefit of the doubt. But I will not sit here and allow you to disrespect everything that this show stands for. Martin laughed again, that same harsh, bitter sound. Oh, what are you going to do, Lorraine? Are you going to cry about it? Are you going to run off the set? Lorraine's eyes narrowed. No, Martin, I'm not going to run off the set. But you are. This is my show. These are my crew members. This is my audience. And I will not have someone come in here and treat any of us with such blatant disrespect. Martin's smirk faltered for the first time. You can't kick me off. Do you know who I am? Lorraine's voice was ice cold now. I know exactly who you are, Martin. You're someone who has forgotten that television is about connecting with people. You've become so obsessed with ratings and drama that you've lost sight of what really matters. And right now, what matters is that you leave. Immediately. Martin stood up, his face red with anger. You can't do this. I came here as a guest. I came here to talk about my work. You came here and insulted me, my team, and my show, Lorraine said firmly. You called my work boring. You called me tired. You suggested I should step aside. Well, Martin, I'm not going anywhere. But you are. The crew had started to move now. A stage manager was approaching Martin, gesturing toward the exit. But Martin was not ready to go quietly. This is ridiculous, he snapped, his voice rising. You're proving my point. You can't handle any criticism. You can't handle anyone telling you the truth. This is exactly what's wrong with this show. It's soft. It's weak. Just like you. Lorraine's expression did not change. The truth, Martin, is that you came onto my show expecting to tear me down. You thought you could walk in here, insult me on live television, and somehow that would make you look powerful or important. But all you've done is show everyone watching exactly what kind of person you are. Martin's face twisted with rage. You have no idea what you're doing. Do you know how many connections I have? Do you know how many people I know in this industry? Lorraine crossed her arms. I'm sure you have plenty of connections, Martin, but right now, none of them are going to help you. You need to leave. The stage manager had reached Martin now, gently but firmly guiding him toward the exit. Martin shook off the stage manager's hand, his movements jerky with anger. Fine, Martin spat. I'll leave, but you're making a huge mistake. You could have learned something from me. You could have made this show better. But instead, you're just going to keep doing the same tired routine until nobody's watching anymore. Lorraine's voice was steady and calm. Martin, I've been doing this for longer than you've been a producer. I know my audience. I know what they want. And what they don't want is someone coming on here and trying to turn a morning show into some kind of aggressive, conflict-driven spectacle. That's not who we are. That's not who I am. Martin was backing toward the exit now, but he could not seem to stop talking. You're delusional. You're living in the past. This whole show is a relic. And you, he pointed at Lorraine, his finger jabbing the air, you're the biggest relic of all. The audience gasped again. And some people were shaking their heads. Others looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. But Lorraine stood tall, her shoulders back, her head held high. She did not flinch. She did not waver. If being a relic means treating people with kindness and respect, Lorraine said quietly, then I'm proud to be one. Now please, Martin, leave my studio. Martin opened his mouth to say something else, but the stage manager stepped in front of him, blocking his view of Lorraine. The message was clear. It was time to go. Martin's face was purple with fury, but he finally turned and stormed toward the exit. As he reached the door, he spun around one last time. You're going to regret this, he shouted across the studio. You're going to wish you had listened to me. Lorraine's voice rang out, clear and strong. The only thing I regret, Martin, is giving you the platform to come on here and embarrass yourself. Goodbye. And with that, Martin Frizell disappeared through the door, the sound of it slamming shut echoing through the studio. For a moment, there was complete silence. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to do. And then, slowly, someone in the audience started to clap. It started with just one person. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, applauding. The sound filled the studio, warm and supportive and genuine. Lorraine looked out at the audience, and for the first time since Martin had walked onto the set, she smiled. A real smile. A grateful smile. She waited for the applause to die down, then sat back in her chair, smoothing her skirt. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes warm and steady. Well, she said, her voice carrying just a hint of amusement. That certainly wasn't what I was expecting this morning. But you know what? Sometimes television doesn't go according to plan. Sometimes you have unexpected guests who say unexpected things. And sometimes, she paused, her smile widening just slightly, you have to remind those guests that respect goes both ways. The audience laughed and clapped again. Lorraine nodded, her composure completely restored. Now, we've got a wonderful show still to come. We're going to talk about some fantastic new books. We've got a cooking segment that smells absolutely divine, and we'll be chatting with a local charity doing amazing work in the community. So let's move forward, shall we? And just like that, Lorraine Kelly moved on. The show continued. The segments went ahead as planned. But everyone who had been in that studio, everyone who had witnessed what happened, knew they had seen something extraordinary. They had seen a host defend her show, her values, and her dignity with grace and strength. Behind the scenes, crew members were buzzing with conversation. Some were shocked. Some were angry on Lorraine's behalf. But all of them were proud. Proud of their host. proud of the way she had handled an impossible situation. One camera operator turned to another and whispered, "Did that really just happen? Did Martin Frizell really come on here and call Lorraine boring?" The other camera operator shook his head in disbelief. "I've been working in television for 20 years. I've never seen anything like that. The nerve of that man. I'm coming onto someone else's show and talking to them like that." A makeup artist joined the conversation, her voice low but fierce. "Did you see her face when he called the show tired? I thought she was going to lose it. But she didn't. She stayed calm. She stayed professional, even when he was being absolutely horrible." "That's Lorraine," someone else said. "She's been in this business long enough to know how to handle people like Martin. She didn't let him get to her. She didn't give him the satisfaction." But the truth was, it had gotten to her. Not in the way Martin had hoped. Not in a way that made her doubt herself or her show. But it had reminded her why she did this. Why she came to work every morning. Why she smiled at the camera and welcomed viewers into her world. It was because of moments like this. Moments that tested her. Moments that required her to stand up for what she believed in. Moments that showed her audience that she was real, that she was strong, and that she would not be pushed around by anyone, no matter how powerful or important they thought they were. As the show continued, Lorraine fell back into her natural rhythm. She chatted with a novelist about her latest book, laughing at the funny parts and asking thoughtful questions about the serious parts. She watched as the chef demonstrated how to make a perfect roast chicken, nodding appreciatively and making jokes about her own cooking disasters. She listened intently as representatives from a children's charity explained the work they were doing, her eyes shining with genuine interest and compassion. This was her show. This was what she did. And no one, not Martin Frizell, not anyone, was going to take that away from her. In the control room, the director leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "Well, that's going to be talked about for a while," he said to no one in particular. His assistant nodded. "Do you think Martin really thought he could come in here and say those things? What was he thinking?" The director shrugged. "I don't think he was thinking. I think his ego got the better of him. He probably thought he could walk in here, criticize everything, and Lorraine would just sit there and take it. He underestimated her. Big time. She handled it perfectly," the assistant said admiringly. "She didn't yell. She didn't get emotional. She just stood her ground and told him to leave. That's real strength." The director nodded. "That's why she's been doing this for so long. That's why people love her. She's authentic. She's real. And she's not afraid to stand up for herself when she needs to." Out in the studio audience, people were still buzzing with excitement. Some were whispering to each other, replaying every moment of the confrontation. Others were watching Lorraine with newfound respect, marveling at how she had handled such a difficult situation with such grace. One woman leaned over to her friend and whispered, "I can't believe he said those things to her." Right to her face, on her own show. Her friend shook her head. "He was so rude, so disrespectful. I'm glad she kicked him off. He deserved it." "She was amazing," the first woman said. "The way she stayed calm. The way she didn't let him rattle her. I would have been so upset." "That's why she's Lorraine Kelly," her friend replied with a smile. "She's a professional, and she knows how to handle herself." As the show drew to a close, Lorraine looked into the camera one last time. Her makeup was still perfect. Her smile was still warm. But there was something else in her eyes now. A quiet satisfaction. A sense of pride. "Thank you so much for joining us today," she said, her voice as gentle and inviting as ever. "It's been quite a morning, hasn't it? But that's the beauty of live television. You never quite know what's going to happen. We'll be back tomorrow with more great guests, more wonderful stories, and hopefully," she paused, her eyes twinkling with humor, "a little less drama. Take care, everyone. See you tomorrow." The cameras cut away. The lights dimmed. The show was over. But the impact of what had happened would linger for a long time. Lorraine Kelly had shown millions of viewers what it meant to stand up for yourself, to defend your work, to refuse to be diminished by someone who thought they could walk all over you. As she stood up from her chair and removed her microphone, crew members gathered around her. Some patted her on the back. Some gave her thumbs up. Some simply smiled at her with admiration and respect. "That was incredible, Lorraine," one of them said. "You were amazing." Lorraine smiled, but there was a hint of weariness in her expression now. "Thank you. I just did what needed to be done. Nobody gets to come on this show and disrespect us. Not on my watch." Someone else chimed in. "Do you think he'll try to cause trouble? You know how he is. He has connections." Lorraine shrugged. "Let him try. I've been in this business long enough to know that the truth always comes out. Everyone saw what happened. Everyone heard what he said. If he tries to spin this into something it wasn't, people will see right through it." She was right, of course. The moment the show ended, social media exploded. People who had been watching at home took to their keyboards, sharing their shock, their outrage, and their overwhelming support for Lorraine. Within minutes, her name was trending. Within an hour, clips of the confrontation were being shared thousands of times. The overwhelming consensus was clear. Lorraine Kelly had handled herself with dignity, grace, and strength. Martin Frizell had revealed himself to be arrogant, disrespectful, and completely out of touch. The court of public opinion had spoken, and it was not in Martin's favor. Back in the studio, as the crew packed up equipment and prepared for the next day's show, there was a sense of solidarity. They had all witnessed something extraordinary. They had all seen their host stand up to someone who had tried to belittle her, and they were all incredibly proud to be part of her team. Lorraine Kelly walked out of the studio that day with her head held high. She had done nothing wrong. She had simply refused to be disrespected. And in doing so, she had shown everyone watching that standing up for yourself is not about being confrontational or aggressive. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Martin Frizell had walked onto that set thinking he could control the narrative. He thought he could use Lorraine's show as a platform to promote his own ideas about what television should be. And he thought he could criticize her work, her hosting style, her entire career, and face no consequences. He was wrong. Spectacularly wrong. And in 35 seconds, his entire plan had fallen apart. One comment, one insult too far, and everything had changed. The lesson was clear. Respect matters. Kindness matters. And no matter how powerful or important you think you are, there will always be someone willing to stand up to you if you cross the line. That someone on this particular morning was Lorraine Kelly, and she had done it perfectly. What made the moment even more powerful was how unexpected it had been. Nobody watching at home had anticipated such a confrontation. They had tuned in expecting the usual warmth, the usual uplifting segments, the usual comfort that Lorraine's show always provided. Instead, they witnessed a masterclass in standing up for yourself. The contrast between Lorraine and Martin could not have been more stark. Where she was composed, he was agitated. Where she was respectful, he was contemptuous. Where she showed strength through restraint, he showed weakness through aggression. It was a reminder that true power does not come from putting others down. It comes from lifting yourself up. In the hours following the show, people could not stop talking about it. Coffee shops buzzed with conversation. Office workers gathered around computers to watch clips. Phone lines lit up as friends called friends to discuss what they had witnessed. The moment had struck a chord with viewers in a way that few television moments ever do. It was not just about Lorraine defending herself, though that was certainly part of it. It was about something deeper. It was about the countless people who had ever been talked down to by someone in a position of power. The countless employees who had been belittled by bosses. The countless professionals who had been dismissed because of their age, or their approach, or their values. In standing up to Martin, Lorraine had stood up for all of them. She had shown that it was possible to maintain your dignity while defending yourself, that you could be strong without being cruel, that you could set boundaries without losing your composure. These were lessons that resonated far beyond the world of television. Back in the studio that had become the site of such an extraordinary moment, life continued. The set would be reset for the next morning's show. The cameras would roll again. The lights would shine just as brightly. And Lorraine would be back in her chair, welcoming viewers with that same warm smile, that same genuine energy. But something had changed. Something fundamental. The show would go on, yes, but everyone involved knew that they had been part of something significant. They had witnessed a line being drawn. They had seen what happens when someone crosses that line. And they had learned that kindness and professionalism should never be mistaken for weakness. So yes, Martin Frizell had been kicked off Lorraine Kelly's show after a heated clash, but it was so much more than that. It was a moment of truth, a moment of courage, a moment that reminded everyone watching that respect is not optional, dignity is not negotiable, and kindness is not weakness.